Grace, and this is Goodness Gracious. Thank you so much for joining me. My oven has just preheated, sorry about that. So today we are going to be making a cake. Very excited, it's the first cake that I'm going to share with you. It's very simple, and before I get started, I just wanted to say one more time a huge thank you for following me, for watching my videos. I know some of them are pretty long and I like to talk a lot, so I really do appreciate that, and it's pretty cool to see all the comments that are coming in. I'm glad that you're baking and that it's bringing you joy through this time that we're currently in. We are baking a cake today. This is one of my favorites. I think I first found this recipe about a year ago. It was spring as well. This is a beautiful spring cake. And you're going to see it actually has a beautiful natural color. I always do look for natural colors and flavors whenever I'm making something like a cake or a cookie. Because there are so many things in nature that bring amazing elements to baked goods. You don't necessarily have to use the artificial stuff. There's a time and place for that, but it's pretty cool when you can find something that's extremely vibrant without using any of it. So this is an almond blood orange cake. It was first brought to my attention through Instagram, actually. I follow Zoe Bakes. She is phenomenal. She's one of my favorite pastry chefs to follow. She has had an outstanding career. She's got a couple of really great books out there. I love it when you find a baker on Instagram and there's just fantastic music in the background and you can tell that they're just sort of in their zone doing their thing, and Zoe absolutely does that. So highly recommend following her and checking her out. So yes, an almond blood orange cake. It's not your average everyday cake by any means, but it is so delicious. It's definitely more of a pound cake style cake, which is what Zoe says in her blog as well, which just means that it's a bit heavy. It also is not a layered cake, which simplifies the decorating steps at the end of all of this, which is really nice, and it still comes out so pretty and very spring-like, which is appropriate. So I of course have my station set up here ready to go. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. One of the first things that I did, I actually found this bundt cake in a thrift store a little while ago, and it's got a really nice design. You can find some cool bundt pans now. The key with a bundt is a lot of butter and flour in these guys, because you want to keep and maintain the crisp, cool shapes that you find in a bundt pan when you're baking with them. So that's done. I have here at my station too, just to get ready, I've got a whisk. I really like this whisk. I think I got it at Williams & Sonoma on sale, which is nice because they rarely have sales. I have my nice spatula, of course. And then I've got everything ready to go here. So this is a key ingredient that might be hard to come by these days. I'm sorry about that. But it's actually easier to find, generally speaking, than you would expect. So this is marzipan. And it is an almond paste. But marzipan is a wonderful thing, and you can also sculpt with it. So you can make little pieces of fruit. There are some cultures too that just eat marzipan as a candy, so that's pretty cool. That's not something that I grew up with, but I'm a fan. It's delicious. It's mostly almond with a little bit of rose water as well. So you can actually find marzipan in a lot of the big grocery stores, surprisingly, in the baking section. It's usually around here, so in Canada, as far as I know. You can find it in a white container that looks kind of like a little tube in the baking section with a little brown bear on it, from what I remember. So that's the type that I've been able to find. If you can't find it, and if you happen to have almond flour and almond extract in your pantry, you can make it yourself, and it's super easy. So this is actually homemade marzipan. I whipped it up a couple of days ago, and it keeps in the fridge for a few days too, which is nice. It does have egg in it, so you've got to be careful. I would suggest just baking with this kind unless you're using pasteurized eggs. But it's so simple. You can actually whip it up in a food processor. And I'll share that recipe with you too, in case you're interested in making your own marzipan. Really important anytime you're baking a cake. You need everything to be room temperature. So that includes the butter. This is room temperature. I used my dough cutter, of course, to cut these into little pieces. It's at room temperature now, so it's ready to go. I also have some sugar here. I've got my vanilla. I'm sorry, I know that during my brownie video, I actually forgot to show you me adding the vanilla in. So apologies for that, it was in there. We'll make sure that happens today. I also have a little tiny bit of salt. So it says 1/8 of a teaspoon, 1/8 to 1/4 is probably fine. Then this is just a little bit of, I think it's a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. Leavening agent. So there is no baking soda in here, it's only baking powder. Baking powder is generally used as a leavening agent when you want leavening to happen when heat is involved, which is interesting, right? So baking soda actually requires an acid to react to the baking. So it's like when you're adding vinegar and baking soda together in a classroom experiment, which a lot of us did in science class growing up. So that is what happens when you're baking with baking soda, which means that baking soda only works as a leavening agent in a recipe that has an acid in it. So interesting fun fact, and you'll probably notice that now if that interests you. When you're looking at recipes that call for baking soda, there's going to be an acid of some kind. So that's pretty cool. That's our leavening agent. We also have 5 eggs, which also adds some lift, structure, protein, and fat. When I say structure, that really is the protein. And so there are 5, which adds to the density of this cake for sure, as well as the moisture content, and makes it just so delicious. So that's that richness as well. We've got our sugar, and I also zested, so the other kind of funny ingredient, but it was actually just at my handy market down the street. We had a ton of blood oranges, so I think that's a thing that's quite seasonal right now. So I'm hoping you'll be able to find blood oranges in your grocery store too. They are so delicious, they're very fragrant, and it's pretty cool. Like the zest is even a little bit darker. They generally look like a regular orange on the outside, but when you cut into them, they are so beautiful, such a deep red. And so don't forget, I purchased 3 just to be safe because you never know about the size. The glaze calls for the juice, so don't get rid of the orange that you zest. You're going to use that later in the glaze itself. So that's 1 blood orange zested, and that's pretty much it. I also, of course, have my flour here. I don't have any cake flour. That would be ideal in this situation and for most cakes. Pay attention to that because the flour matters. Cake flour is low in protein, which means that you're not going to get as significant of a gluten structure in your cake or in your product in general, which is kind of important. That's what you want in a cake, right? You want it to be light and fluffy and sort of melt in your mouth. And that's what cake flour provides. You want a little bit of structure, but not too much, and it differentiates and it changes the crumb structure of whatever you're baking. This is all-purpose, which is still on the low end of the gluten structure spectrum, if you will. So it's going to be fine for our purposes, especially since this is a pound cake style. That's our sifted flour. I'm going to start mixing together the dry ingredients first. So I'll throw in my baking powder. And you'll notice that I've kept the sieve that I used to sift my flour for those little ingredients too. In particular, the baking powder to break it up so that there are no clumps left. Salt sometimes doesn't go through a sieve, so I recommend just tossing it in, because we're also going to don't up the sugar yet. That'll be added to the butter and marzipan mixture in a moment. So I'm going to be using my whisk just to lightly toss the dry ingredients that have been sifted around so that you don't get any spots. You want to make sure that the baking powder especially and salt is evenly distributed throughout this. Otherwise you're going to get potentially little spots in your cake, and you never really want to bite into a piece of cake with baking powder in it. A hunk of baking powder anyway. Okay, that is perfectly fine, so that should be well distributed throughout. We're just gonna set this to the side. That'll be added in a little bit. So next, make sure your marzipan, like everything, is at room temperature because you don't want to break your mixer. This can also be used with a hand beater if you don't have a KitchenAid mixer. I'm going to use mine today with a paddle attachment, just because I find that it's the best thing to break this up, but you can use a hand mixer as well. Yeah, because this wasn't in a tube and because it's homemade and it's at room temperature, it actually is broken up really quickly, which is nice. That's what you want. It might take a little bit longer for you. And next, we're gonna add the sugar. They aren't going to really want to combine, but just be patient with the marzipan and it will eventually break up. So this is starting to break up together, which is what you want. And as that gets broken down together even more, so I'm gonna start adding very slowly. So piece by piece, these are about, I don't know, a half to a full inch worth of butter. I'm gonna start adding the butter to this mixture. And I'm also, at this point, I'm going to add the zest. Make sure this is from a full orange. Make sure it all gets in there. When you're zesting an orange, make sure some graters are quite tough. Like they'll actually tear off quite a bit of zest. And that's fine because it actually makes the process easier. Just be careful because you don't want to get too much of the white stuff. The pith that you're cutting into after the orange is gone, it can be very bitter. And you don't want that to translate into your product. Okay, I don't need the eggs just yet. I'm also going to incorporate the vanilla. So it's a teaspoon of vanilla. So you're really creaming the butter and sugar together, right? Which is generally one of the steps that takes place in a lot of cakes. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm going to scrape down the sides. Give it another whip to make sure that everything is fully incorporated. If you're using towels for baking, just remember that that's what you can use them for and throw them into the wash after you're done. Okay, now I'm gonna bring over my eggs. All 5 at room temperature. Make sure too, sometimes I like to keep them in a bowl because they like to roll off the counter. I'm being a little bit reckless today. Okay, I'm gonna do this on slow, one at a time. And now again, I'm just gonna scrape down the sides and make sure that everything is fully mixed together without overbeating anything. It's cool because at this step, often you'll be able to smell the orange zest in there. It's amazing how much flavor orange zest actually adds to a cake. No juice added, just the orange zest. And now we're adding the flour. I'm just gonna add it all at once. It's been sifted, which is great. Just make sure you get it all in there. It's a small amount too, so it shouldn't spray too much. If there was more, I would maybe use a spatula first to incorporate it a little bit. I'll go so slow speed. You'll notice too, there's no milk or water. And there's no additional oil added to this. That's because the majority of the moisture in this cake come from the eggs. And that's what's going to give us, oops. Oh, it's a piece of zest. I saw something and I was thinking to myself, what on earth? That makes more sense. Good, just again checking the bottom, making sure everything is fully incorporated. Happy days. Okay, now very carefully and hopefully evenly, we'll see how this goes, I'm going to be adding the mixture to the pan. Something that I saw on Zoe Bakes as I was learning how to make this cake for the first time myself. she adds slowly about this much, if that makes sense, so a spatula worth of batter, evenly around in a circle to the bottom of the bundt, and then she continues to do that as evenly as possible without spreading it around too much, because you don't want to take off that flour and butter on the sides. Yay. Okay, I'm happy with that. Okay, you don't want to wait too long because there are eggs in there and there's the baking powder that's just ready to go. If there was baking soda in this cake, I would be even more concerned with getting the cake in the oven as soon as possible, because it's already started to react to the acid in the mixture, right? Baking powder, on the other hand, needs the heat from the oven to actually start doing its job. And now we're gonna pop it in there. So I'll put the 20-minute timer on, and I'm gonna continuously check on it just to make sure that it's baked all the way through. Preferably, if you've got a toothpick to check, just like with the brownies, that's what you wanna be doing with this cake, but you don't wanna open the oven too soon because you don't want the cake to fall. That would be bad. All right. Just kidding. So the other thing that I wanted to do while the cake is in the oven, of course I'm going to clean up, but the other thing that I wanted to show you, and I'll just make some room for this, is how to make the glaze. We can do that now. You could absolutely do that in advance, or even once the cake is cooling too, but we might as well make it now. So I have already juiced. You can juice by hand. The blood oranges are very soft, so they're easy to handle. Just make sure you don't get any seeds in the juice. I have, this is one of my other favorite tools in the kitchen. It is a lovely juicer. This is one of the reasons why I absolutely love this cake. So I just took out my covered pre-juiced blood orange juice from the fridge. And I'm gonna bring this closer because it is just an amazing color. Yes. And it smells so good. Blood oranges tend to be a little bit more on the sour side, I would say, depending on what kind you get. These ones are quite sweet actually, which is nice. So it'll provide a nice slight tartness to our glaze. So all this requires is a 1/4 cup of blood orange juice and some icing sugar. It's starting to get a little darker out there, so I've turned on the lights. What I'm going to do, don't know if I've talked to you yet about a kitchen scale, but that is also one of my favorite tools. They're all my favorite tools, really. Who are we kidding in the kitchen? But this is really important, especially when you're baking something like a cake that needs to be super, super precise. Confectioner sugar or icing sugar. I'm gonna actually pour the juice in my bowl first. It smells so good. I love that color. So this is going to translate. It looks quite deep, of course, with the icing sugar added. And once the glaze is actually on the cake, it actually just looks very pink and lovely. So I also have a sieve here, just to make sure that you get rid of all of those icing sugar lumps. You don't want those. Okay. Thought I was done. You know what, I'm gonna mix a cup at a time. I may even, once I think I have as many of the lumps out myself as possible, I'm probably gonna put this through a sieve again, just to make sure there are no lumps left, because you're gonna see that. Yeah, lovely. Okay, great. Now I'm going to clean up this mess and I will come back to you soon. So I'm gonna take a look at this guy in about a minute. The timer's gonna go off just through the oven door. I'm not gonna open it yet. I'll set it for another 10 minutes probably, check on it again. If it looks dry, that's when I'm going to test it. And then we'll see. It'll probably take at least 40 minutes in my oven, maybe a little bit longer. And we'll see each other when that's done. Okay, I'm back. Mine, because of how deep my pan is and my oven is a little bit hot sometimes too, so This actually only took about 35 minutes in the oven, but definitely follow the guidelines. So I would say it's likely going to take most people at least 40 minutes. So just be aware of that and watch it. I knew it was done when it started to look a little golden around the edges. It's a nice light cake, so you can really see the color difference. It was fully done and risen around the sides and through the middle as well. And then when I did take it out eventually, I just tested it with a knife to make sure that the middle wasn't wet anymore, and it came out clean. So this has been approximately, I'm just sitting cooling out of the oven for just over 10 minutes. What I have done, because you don't want to destroy the beautiful pattern of your bent pan, right? And that's now on your cake. I've just gently, with my fingers, I've tried to take away the edges. If you really need to, you can always use a knife too, but you don't want to destroy that. So ideally, this will come out of the pan just by taking your fingers around the edge and just gently taking the edge away. Okay, so now the instructions do say to flip it at this point, but don't be discouraged if it doesn't come out right away. I have a feeling mine won't. So we will see. It's quite warm still. I'm just going to be careful here. I have my rack here ready to go to my cooling rack. Yeah, so gently I'm just going to place it like that. And I'm just going to let this fall. So hopefully over time, as this cools, it will actually fall completely out of the pan. I don't want to force it, so it might require a little bit of patience. If after another 10 to 15 minutes, when this is cooled a little bit more, it doesn't come out, then you may have to go around the edges again with your fingers. Try that. And then if that doesn't work, then you can try to ease it out very carefully around the edges with a knife, but try your hardest not to have to do that. So while that cools and hopefully falls out of its pan, I also have, of course, the glaze that we made earlier covered and just set aside. The other thing that I wanted to share with you that I'm pretty excited about the other day, this was basically my project for an entire afternoon. I am still learning, but I've made these roses. I'm gonna bring them a little bit closer. I'm pretty proud of them. You'll see, I can do this just because this has been refrigerated and they're fully hardened. So those are my roses that I'm going to decorate my cake with on top of the glaze once it's fully cooled. These are made with the American buttercream or frosting. Okay, welcome back. I have completed my bundt cake. You can see that it is currently in one piece. I unfortunately had a little bit of trouble getting it out of the bundt pan. So it was actually in a few different pieces moments ago. The great thing about a glaze and also putting together some buttercream flowers is that you can actually try your very hardest to mend your cake. It's the same as if you were to accidentally break a layer of cake when you're putting together a birthday cake or a celebration cake of sorts. You can absolutely mend it. With buttercream, you can hide your errors. It's just so discouraging sometimes. To be honest, I was not happy with myself when this did not come out, but you move on and you put it together the best that you can. So I'm actually pretty happy with how it looks now. I'm gonna cut fairly small pieces. If I had a smaller bundt cake pan, what would have been really lovely is for this cake, of course, to be a little bit taller. It's kind of flat. You'll notice if you go to Zoe Bakes, hers is lovely. Ooh, but I'm really happy with that cut. You can see, so it's a very moist, dense cake. That's how it's supposed to be. And it's evenly baked all the way through. It looks really nice with the flour on there. I'm gonna plop that down. Lovely. Yeah, okay, good. So there is a beautiful piece of cake. All right, now the moment you've all been waiting for, certainly me. It smells really good. I'm going to do a little taste test here. Mm-hmm. It's so moist. It melts in your mouth. Sorry, I say that a lot. I know people don't like that word, but it's tender. I don't know what else to say. It's very good. You can taste the blood orange in the glaze. It just hits your tongue a little bit when you take a full bite of the cake. You get a bit of the almond from the marzipan in there. It's really, really flavorful, but it's also very refreshing, I find. It's perfect for spring. I love a citrus cake, and citrus and almond is just such a great match. Yeah, so please try to make this sponge cake. It's so fantastic. You could probably also put it in a pound cake pan, to be honest. Maybe a couple because it's so much batter. But yeah, please let me know what you think of this video. And also, if you end up making this delicious blood orange almond cake from Zoe Bakes, let me know what you think. I hope you do. It's delicious.